Normally, biohackers really get on, but not at the moment. Rhonda Patrick says your morning coffee is safe. Gary Brecka says it's full of mold. Who's right? Today's guest has strong opinions. This is Biohacking News. Hello and welcome to Biohacking News. A lot of coffee chat today. Let's go straight away and bring him on. Alex Higham from Exhale Coffee, our resident coffee expert. Alex, how you doing?
I'm very good, mate. How are you?
Really good. Yeah. I mean, we should probably point out that I can actually see where you live from where I live, but we're still doing this online.
Just wave at each other. Hey.
Anyway, now a lot of I feel like I get more coffee questions and coffee chats than anything else on social media, especially over on the histamine intolerance page that I run. People love talking about coffee, and perhaps we should just go over that. There's going to be 5 topics we're going to talk about on today's podcast, which have all blown up in the biohacking world in the last week, haven't they? It is these 5 topics. So unfiltered coffee and cholesterol. Are mycotoxins in coffee a big issue? Does milking coffee reduce its health benefits? Is it a bad idea? We need to talk about whether decaf methods are okay and whether instant coffee is okay. So all of those things, if you're interested in any of those topics, then stick around. Should we start with cholesterol? Actually, could you sort of summarize the story? Because I've been following this over the last week, but I know this is your gig, isn't it? Coffee. So you've really been following this story. What actually happened and how is it all blown up?
Yeah, so look, first of all, I'd like to say I'm a massive fanboy of Dr. Rhonda Patrick. So it might appear that we're going toe to toe on this, but total massive fan. And the podcast she released the podcast about a week ago on coffee. And as usual, it's an incredible podcast. And I agree with 95% of what's in there. And actually, she summed it up beautifully at the end when she said, I'm gonna recite a sentence of hers of how she summed it up. She said, coffee was a powerful tool backed by rigorous science for enhancing health span, extending lifespan, and protecting against the deadliest diseases of aging, including heart disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. So she's overall was a massive fan of coffee, but she gave a few specific recommendations around how to drink coffee that I just disagree with.
Yeah, so that happened. And then there's been loads of chat about it. And Gary Brecka has been posting saying pretty much the exact opposite, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So I haven't kind of dived too much into what he's been saying. So, but yeah, I think he's argued a few points around mycotoxins specifically.
Yeah, well, don't worry, because I have, and we can bring that in as we go. Let's start then with what Rhonda Patrick's been saying, because firstly, she brought out the podcast, then she's been sort of doubling down on all this with posts. And I think the first one that people are really interested in, partly because there's so much conflicting information around cholesterol, but she said unfiltered coffee raises cholesterol. Is that right?
Yeah, so, and that is true. Like unfiltered coffee does raise cholesterol. And it raises cholesterol more than filtered coffee. So that is right. And I agree with that. But I think she overhyped how much of an issue that is. First of all, like coffee, cholesterol, and I think our listeners of your podcast will be kind of with me on this. Like coffee, cholesterol is like massively, misunderstood and misreported. Like it's not necessarily, high LDL is not necessarily the end of the world for everybody. Okay. So first of all, let's just be clear on that.
Absolutely. It's the sort of cholesterol, isn't it? It's the difference between the fluffy cholesterol and the sort of hard cholesterol that you want to worry about, which is far more nuanced.
Yeah, size of the particles, whether those particles are oxidized, in the context of your broader diet. Like if you have a really high sugar diet, and your arteries are all very inflamed, then high cholesterol is going to be more of an issue for you. But like if you're kind of in the biohacking space, I think all our body needs cholesterol. We couldn't live without cholesterol. Every cell in our body uses cholesterol and makes our own cholesterol. So, it's not such a big issue. However, so coffee does raise LDL cholesterol, which is typically referred to as a bad cholesterol. But coffee, there's a paradox here because all coffee is repeatedly associated with a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease and other issues related to high cholesterol levels. So, and that's coffee in general, and that's loads of studies, loads of massive epidemiological studies. Okay. And so if high LDL was such an issue, why would you get these kind of associations? But the paradox exists. But there are other studies which have tried to explain why coffee drinkers have a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, but high LDL. And there's been 3 really interesting mechanisms demonstrated in recent studies in the last couple of years, which explain it. So one of them is caffeine in coffee. So Max Lugavera spoke about this in quite a few podcasts. That's where I first heard about it. But there's a 2022 study which showed that caffeine acts as a natural PCSK9 inhibitor. And that, there's a lot of pharmaceutical drugs which, work on cholesterol levels, which work through the same mechanism. And basically that makes your body more effective at clearing cholesterol. So you might have high LDL levels, but the caffeine helps you clear it more effectively.
Okay, just like it helps you go for a poo, it helps you clear cholesterol as well. I'm thinking that's the same mechanism.
Exactly the same.
It probably actually is similar, but I know that's a ridiculous thing to say, but it probably is a similar way.
Love it. But yeah, okay, cool. So the other thing is so then that's the caffeine, right? But then other people, we've had quite a few customers contact us about this. So someone said to us, oh, but what about decaf drinkers then? Because we don't get the benefits of the caffeine. Is it an issue for us? Well, there's another mechanism which shown that chlorogenic acid in coffee, which is its main polyphenol, inhibits the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. And it's only oxidized LDL cholesterol that's an issue. So chlorogenic acid inhibits the oxidation of LDL. So if you're drinking a high chlorogenic acid coffee, then that can counteract these high LDL levels as well.
Yeah. But your coffee is not high chlorogenic.
Well, no. So ours is. So being high in chlorogenic acid is a good thing because it's
a good thing, right?
Chlorogenic acid that inhibits the oxidation. So you want more. So chlorogenic acid is the polyphenol. So that's a good thing in coffee. You want it. Our coffee's high in it, and that kind of helps protect your body against high LDL cholesterol levels. So
bloody hell, it's confusing, isn't it? And then there was a third one as well, was there?
There was a third one that coffee increases SIRT1 concentrations in your blood, and SIRT1 has been shown to be cardioprotective as well. So it could be that's helping as well. Then interestingly, there's another study which separates out different types of coffee beans. So our coffee is Arabica, and most high quality coffees are Arabica beans. Lower quality coffees are Robusta beans. So there's a study which separated them out, and it showed that Robusta beans in unfiltered coffee increases LDL, but Arabica beans, when used in unfiltered coffee, didn't increase LDL. So the type of bean could have an impact.
So we can summarize that first point as, Rhonda, we love you, but you're wrong on this point.
That's what I'd say. Yeah. But the other thing to remember is if you're using a paper filter, first of all, we don't want to dictate what people do and don't do. If people like drinking coffee from an espresso or cafetiere, drink it that way. We're trying to liberate people from all of these dogmatic kind of beliefs and instructions. But there's some really healthy compounds in coffee, the diterpenes and cafesol and cariol, which using a paper filter filters them out. And so if you use a paper filter, you're not getting the benefits of these diterpenes. And they've been shown to have loads of benefits in their own right, from being anti-cancerous, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and protect against diabetes, I think. So you're losing those compounds. So on many levels, we disagree.
Okay, well, we'll get to mycotoxins in coffee in just a sec, but I wanted to ask you, has this whole thing over the last week or two, is it generally a net positive for businesses like yours because it shines a light on mycotoxins in coffee, healthy coffee, toxins in coffee, and so on?
I think so. Yeah, I think in general, her podcast was very, very positive about coffee. She talks about how coffee slows down biological aging, how it protects your DNA, how coffee drinkers have longer telomeres. So loads of positive things about coffee. So I think most people listening to it will just hear all those positives. But it's just me as a real coffee geek is just hearing the odd little kind of nuanced points that she makes that disagree with what we do. So I think in general, it's really positive.
Well, the next bit is the bit where Rhonda Patrick and Gary Brecka disagreed in public, and again with the sort of disclaimer that we love them both. But Rhonda Patrick said most commercial coffees are fine, and mycotoxins aren't a big concern. And that is not what Gary Brecka says. Gary Brecka says you really do want to think about mycotoxins. I'm very focused on mycotoxins, and so is a lot of my audience, because it took me many, many years to figure out why I was histamine intolerant. But it turns out it's because of the mycotoxins in my body. And therefore, I think it stands to reason that any repeated exposure to foods with high levels of mycotoxins can re-trigger my symptoms. You're not on Rhonda's side on this one, are you?
No, I'm not. And to your point, actually, there's research which shows that 12% of our total exposure to mycotoxins comes from coffee alone. That's just one study. 12% of our total exposure. Yeah. So to your point, like I drink 3 cups of coffee a day, 3 mugs of coffee a day, which is about a liter of coffee a day. And I will do that for decades, probably until the day I die. And if I'm drinking a liter of coffee a day that has mycotoxins in, even if they're not insanely high levels of mycotoxins, that continued burden, toxic burden that your body's under because of this like continual chronic exposure to mycotoxins just isn't going to do you any favors. So yeah, be mindful of the chronic exposure. But yeah, okay. So going back and getting into the weeds on this, there's a 2019 meta-analysis which pulled data from 36 different studies. Okay, and they concluded that the global concentration of ochratoxin in coffee was 3.21 micrograms per kilo. So the global average was 3.21. Okay, last year the EU they set a safe maximum limit for the levels of mycotoxins in coffee, and the safe limit was 5. Last year they reduced it to 3. So if the global average is 3.21, even the EU is saying the safe limit is 3. So then according to this meta-analysis, it's not just a single study, meta-analysis, the global average is higher than the safe limit set by the EU. Yeah. And like, surely that's the only thing I need to say in this argument.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And what are the levels of ochratoxin in your coffee?
Well, I mean, 0. Well, we test ours. So we test ours to be free from mold, ochratoxin, aflatoxin, yeast, pesticides, heavy metals. So yeah, none of that stuff.
Wow.
So it's just like, this stuff's all around us. Like our livers, some people's, if you have a really healthy liver, you can kind of clear some level of mycotoxins out of your liver, etc., like is the common stance that most people take. But if avoiding them is just one simple swap, then why take the risk, and why not just make that one simple swap? It's not like we're telling people, oh, you've got to add an hour of exercise a day into your life, or you've got to, switch up and stop eating sugary snacks and all this stuff, which is a really difficult thing to ask people to do. All we're saying is just swap your coffee. It's so easy.
Yeah. And obviously Rhonda Patrick disagrees, but I'm with you on this one. And then in terms of like sensitivity, I am very annoyingly sensitive to a lot of things. And I know you're sensitive to quite a lot of things as well. Coffee is one of the things that actually I can go into a bog standard coffee shop, get a coffee, and I won't feel bad the next day. I don't even really particularly get the jitters. Thankfully, I'm not sensitive to coffee on an immediate level. Are you, and are some people, or is it more of a sort of long-term thing about mycotoxins?
No, I am. And like when I go to a cafe, especially a lot of the local cafes here, I'll have a coffee and I'll immediately get brain fog. I'm very sensitive to these things. I immediately get brain fog from the coffee. So there's a lot of reasons it could be, but it's probably because they use an old stale beans which have been contaminated in some way. So yeah, I am sensitive.
Because here in Portugal, the big coffee brand, which is like the real mainstream one, is Delta, isn't it? And all the coffee shops have Delta in there. But I feel fine drinking that stuff. You don't know.
Lucky you. No, I mean, and it could be any one of lots of different reasons, but it's not every coffee shop, but I'd say probably about 2/3 of coffee shops give me brain fog. And this is the other thing to consider in this. Like, a lot of people who are listening to this podcast have probably got into biohacking and become obsessed with health because of some kind of health issue. Then those people should be absolutely avoiding mycotoxins. If you if you've never heard of the word mycotoxin, then maybe you're not someone who needs to worry about it, and you can just kind of go on blindly ignoring it and be fine. So it's different for everyone.
It's really interesting how the conversation around lots of things in our world changes over time, isn't it? I mean, I know I was telling you recently that I had Walter Lungo on the podcast, and that's blown so many people's minds, including my own. Everyone's been fasting for 18 hours. And he basically said, actually, guys, the research consistently shows all the time that people who fast for 18 hours every day don't live as long. And we don't know why, but that's the case. So don't fast for that long every day. And that's it's mad information, isn't it? Because everyone in the biohacking world's been intermittent fasting that long every time. And I feel like with a lot of these topics, it's similar, and especially the milk in coffee topic coming up as well.
No, but the most important thing actually on that point is that, even the EU last year, or perhaps it was a year before now, but anyway, about a year ago, the EU reduced their safe limit from 5 to 3 micrograms per kilo. So even they, and that was based on a report, based on evidence they sat on for 2 years, and it took them 2 years to act on that. So, they could be sitting on more evidence now. Well, there is more evidence, like I've just explained. And actually, if anyone wants to read more evidence, head to our website. We've got a blog on mycotoxins where I pull up dozens of studies on this, go into it in real depth. So even the EU are kind of getting on board with this slowly, and it's stuff that we've known for years.
Yeah. So in terms of sort of health myths, I feel there are a few around coffee and milk and putting stuff in your coffee. What did Rhonda Patrick say about that? And because she's been posting again and again over the last week or so about coffee, hasn't she?
Yeah, this one crops up from time to time. It came up a few years ago, and basically it's the argument that adding milk to your coffee reduces the absorption of the beneficial polyphenols in coffee. Okay, and there are a few studies which show that. So, people love to cite individual studies without taking the full broad perspective of all of the research out there. So I have taken that full broad perspective, and again, I've written a full in-depth blog on this, but basically there are a few studies which support that. So if you are really concerned, listen to those few studies, but equally there are a lot more studies which show the opposite. So there's a 2022 study which found that adding skimmed milk significantly enhanced the bioaccessibility of coffee's polyphenols by up to 64%. Then there was another 2021 review which concluded that the interaction of polyphenols with milk significantly improves the bioactivity of the polyphenolic compounds. That was just polyphenols in general, but and I could go on, there's a long list of these, but there's a ton of studies and reviews showing that actually adding milk to coffee could improve the bioavailability of polyphenols.
Right. So, yeah. And I looked into this before we spoke, and it did seem like some studies show that milk proteins can bind to polyphenols, and then that reduces the bioavailability. And other data suggests it's sort of the opposite. Why do you think, again, saying that we do actually, I've found a lot of value from Rhonda Patrick content over the years, but why do you think she believes that then? Because she's across the science, isn't she?
Yeah, but I think she's not considered all of the studies. I think she's probably just picked one study and kind of jumped on that, or a couple of studies and jumped on that. I don't know how, having read all of the research on this, I don't know how she could take that stance. And it's not just in coffee, there's loads of research and other things of how fat supports the absorption of polyphenols. Like it's known, it's known that if you say have tomatoes, if you have olive oil in the tomatoes, the fat in the olive oil binds to the lycopene in the tomatoes and enhances the absorption of it. So, across all of our diets, that's why it's good to have olive oil on a salad. So, yeah, I mean, and there's lots of nuances. I think I'm just of the stance that until something is categorically proven by the weight of the science that you shouldn't do it, let's not push people and say, if you enjoy having milk in your coffee, don't do it. I hate telling people not to do things, because through my whole health crisis, I was told not to eat this, not to do that. And now I'm kind of revolting against people who tell you not to do things based on one cherry pick study. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that is probably one of the most important reasons, I think, for doing this podcast, in that there is so much misinformation. And like I said, with the Volta Lungo stuff, that's been my most listened to podcast for the last 3 to 6 months, because everybody's like, hang on, I thought the wrong thing, and now I'm sort of finding out a different thing. It is quite hard, isn't it? In our world, there are a lot of people who very, very strongly believe they're right, and they're not always right.
But there's so many people who just, you can find a study to support anything you want to argue. You can find a study, and loads of people just love pulling a study to support their argument. So I just, I think that needs to be, exposed, corrected.
What about decaf then? chemical? What is chemical decaf, and is it really no problem? And what did Rhonda Patrick say about it?
So she did mention, so decaffeination processes, the traditional ones use two chemicals called methylene chloride and ethyl acetate. Now, the mainstream argument is that these chemicals are used to decaffeinate the coffee beans, and that none of it or very little of it ends up in your final brew cup of coffee. So it's okay to use these chemicals. Now, these chemicals are used in, so methylene chloride is the one that's had a really bad rep recently, because about a year ago, methylene chloride was banned by the Environmental Protection Agency in the US for all uses apart from to decaffeinate coffee. So it was previously used quite heavily in paint stripper, but since 1980, 85 deaths have been attributed to methylene chloride, mostly from people using it in paint strippers. So a lot of people are being attributed to it. And last year it was banned from all uses apart from to decaffeinate coffee. So Rhonda Patrick said the levels of methylene chloride are often far lower than the threshold considered harmful by the FDA. And I'm like, well, often isn't quite good enough. Like often isn't good enough. Like if there is an alternative, again, like the Swiss water process or the mountain water process, which we use, why don't you just switch your coffee to one that is water processed and doesn't use any nasty chemicals? And can we just all agree to stop using harmful chemicals anywhere near any food products?
Yeah.
This
is the part of the podcast I'm now finding the most shocking.
Yeah. I know. Why are we still using these chemicals anywhere near foods? Because the whole
what are you using in terms of your decaf then? What is the mountain water process?
So mountain water process, it's done in Mexico, and it's very similar to the Swiss water process, and it only uses pure glacial water from the highest mountain in Mexico, the Pico de Orizaba, no chemicals, nothing else. And it's literally, you just soak the beans in this water. And because these chemicals and because the caffeine is water soluble, the caffeine just is absorbed out of the beans into the water. So it's really like, and then there's like some processes around like drying out the beans and taking the caffeine out of the water. But it's like, you literally just remove it using water. So, but the problem is
mad. But water's, you would have thought that water is cheaper than chemicals.
I know. But the problem is, like most coffee around the world, most decaf around the world, including brands like Starbucks and most of the big chain decaf companies, get their decaffeinated using the chemical processes. So if the overnight chemical decaffeination processes were made illegal, suddenly all these, coffee companies would be totally screwed because they couldn't get there's not enough water processed decaf in the world by a long way to fulfill the world's demand for decaffeinated coffee. So they couldn't just make it illegal overnight. So
I think that is the topic that I have been most shocked by today. And I didn't know that, despite having known you for quite a while. I didn't know that.
Well, you don't even have to put on the label. So the biggest thing going on about this in America at the minute is that you don't have to put on the label of a bag of coffee what the decaffeination process is. So if a company doesn't call it out, assume it's a chemical process. But there's a big petition by someone called the Clean Label Project in America who are petitioning to make it the law to put the decaffeination process on the label of a bag of coffee because it's consumers' right to know. But I think you can basically assume if they don't say it's mountain water process or Swiss water process, or there's a couple of others like CO2 process. But if they don't call out what the process is, assume it's a chemical process.
If it happens while RFK's in charge, you've got a chance. Otherwise, it'll never happen. It's quite similar to wine, that, isn't it? Wine, I think there's about 85 additives that can be added to wine, and they don't have to go on the label. All sorts of crazy stuff that goes in wine because it needs to be preserved.
Yeah. There's so many, and there's so much of it coming out. There's so much. We're going through this MPD process at the minute, and we were with this lab in Wales, and we were talking about kind of adding natural flavors to our next product line, and we started talking about these natural flavors. Like you'll see like vanilla natural flavor listed and these kind of things. And actually, they're allowed to use a lot of chemicals in the production of these natural flavors, but they just don't have to declare it. So yeah. Anyway, that one's going to come in a few years. That's 2026 scandal. So.
What is an MPD process?
Oh, new product development. So developing new
okay.
products. So, we just have to be really careful about what ingredients we put in our new products. And we don't want to include anything that could eventually have all of these like hidden smoke and mirrors type shit going on that we just don't want in a XL product.
Yeah, because every time I see natural flavors, I'm like, oh, well, that's all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's so yeah. I haven't dove deep into this. I'm sure a lot of them are all right, and I'll probably have people recording podcasts next week countering my argument. But
yeah. That Alex from XL Coffee. What's the new product? Are you allowed to say or not?
So I mean, no, we were a good few months off having anything to launch, so I probably shouldn't say. But we're actually exploring about 4 or 5 different new products. So yeah, there's a lot of, we're just like gently exploring lots of different products at the minute. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, people love your coffee so much that they trust you and your grasp of the science and what's healthy and trying to do your best, that they do want to, I'm sure they do want more from you.
Yeah. And we do take it to a slightly obsessive level, which is probably why 5 years in, we've not managed to launch any other products yet, because we've not managed to find any that meet our high standards.
Yeah. And I noticed, you haven't got instant coffee, which is our final topic. So Rhonda Patrick said instant coffee is convenient and can be part of a healthy diet. Come on, Alex. Surely that's right, isn't it?
That instant coffee is very convenient. I mean, first of all, I'm opposed to convenience in coffee anyway. I feel like coffee is a psychoactive drug and it needs to be treated with respect. And people drink a cup of coffee, and things like pods and instant coffee encourage the wrong behavior with coffee, because it encourages people to quickly make a cup of coffee, knock it back, and then race out the door in a state of high stress. And that caffeine hits them hard. And then they have an energy crash and the jitters, and they blame it on the coffee. But actually, you need to really think about how you're consuming that coffee and the mindset and the setting of when you're drinking that coffee. So anyway, I'm fundamentally opposed to that side of instant coffee. But so her argument was that instant coffee is pretty much as healthy as, I think pretty much as healthy as regular coffee. So there are some key reasons why I disagree with this. So first of all, instant coffee contains on average 4 times the mycotoxins of regular coffee. So 2021 study showed that mycotoxins in instant coffee was on average 3 micrograms per kilo, and regular coffee was 0.7 micrograms per kilo. And then yes, there's some instant coffees contain 12.8 micrograms per kilo of ochratoxin, which is 4 times the safe limit of the EU. So there's a lot more mycotoxins in instant coffee.
Right.
The other one is instant coffee has also been linked to increased risks of quite a few diseases. So there's a 2022 study which looked at 320,000 people, and they found that ground coffee, like normal coffee like ours, significantly decreased type 2 diabetes risk, but instant coffee was significantly associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. So that was followed 320,000 people, published a couple of years ago. So very new research.
Yeah.
Then also there's another study which showed that, instant coffee does have some health benefits, right? So that's just one negative, but instant coffee does have some health benefits, but significantly reduced health benefits. So recent study showed that on all-cause mortality, so death from any cause, regular ground coffee drinkers had a 27% reduced risk of all-cause mortality. In instant coffee drinkers, it was 11%. Cardiovascular disease, regular coffee was 20%, instant coffee was 9%. And then heart disease, 22% reduced risk for ground coffee versus 9% for instant coffee. So, you're getting 2 or 3 times the risk reduction if you're drinking regular coffee. So much more pronounced benefits.
And I just wonder if obviously there's clearly more than one study on that, but sometimes people who are buying instant coffee might be less prioritizing other sort of healthy dietary choices at the same time. It's like the studies around red meat, for example, which consistently shows fairly negative outcomes, but that's because people who eat red meat the most tend to be the ones who are going to McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, going back to my earlier point around how you consume coffee, and instant coffee encouraging the wrong type of behavior relationship with coffee. There's a 2021 study which found that heavy instant coffee drinkers had a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So, that could be because of something in the instant coffee, but it also could be because of how you consume the instant coffee. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that could be at play.
Alex, that's absolutely brilliant. We're almost out of time. We haven't even had a chance to chat about microplastics in oysters, which was our other topic. That's another thing we got to worry about.
Yeah, save that for next time, because I can't say that that's something I particularly research much on.
No, exactly. No, read an article, formed an opinion. That's me. Now, before you go, what is a biohack that you've been using recently? What is something that you've been trying out? It can be a bit of tech, a practice, a supplement. It might be something sort of a daily routine, something that you've been trying and you either like or don't like. What have you been doing recently?
I mean, I'm afraid I've jumped on the creatine bandwagon. There's been so much research recently which is pointing towards creatine having like massive brain health benefits and like longevity benefits, and it's been going on for maybe like 6 months now, and I'm firmly on that bandwagon. I think I last took creatine when I was like 19-year-old meathead trying to put on some muscle, and then I just kind of gave up. I realized that I'm going to be a skinny guy forever, and even creatine's not going to help me. But in the last 6 months, I've started taking it again, and yeah, I've been following the research quite closely, and I feel like it's legit. I feel like it's real. I feel like there's also been a wave of other supplements coming over from that bodybuilding world, which are heavily researched for their performance benefits, but I've never really been considered for like longevity benefits. And creatine was the first to move over, but now there's other things like taurine, which Brian Johnson has added to his longevity stack. And there's a few others like L-arginine and carnosine and these things which are starting to get some research behind them supporting longevity as well. So that's my latest, is just and also like if they give me a side of performance benefits, then great as well. Win-win.
Yeah. With the creatine, one of the really interesting things that is definitely, as you say, more recently than when we were 19-year-old skinny dudes trying to become meatheads, as opposed to 49-year-old. And I'm actually a bit older than that. I'll just claim 49. Yeah, 41 for you. But the stuff around, especially when you are underslept, a certain dose of creatine, a lot of the recommendations now saying a little bit higher, maybe up to 5 grams or more, that can really help you feel more alert. And that must be very interesting to you, being in the business of, selling a product that helps you with alertness. And I have found with creatine that I do feel more alert on days that I haven't slept particularly well when I take creatine in my smoothie or whatever it is.
Definitely. And there's some really interesting use cases which I keep hearing about from like I think it's like the Irish professional boxing team, or the amateur boxing team rather. The head coach there gives the boxers like 20 to 30 mega doses of creatine to support their brain health. So for anyone who's like doing a sport or a job where they're at risk of some kind of like brain concussion, high doses of creatine, like 20 to 30 grams, is being shown to be quite protective. So yeah.
Wow, that's absolutely nuts. In terms of, so I've got 2 more questions there on that. Firstly, is that I do find there's a slight, how can I put it, probably the opposite to a laxative effect from having creatine. And I can only imagine if I was taking 30 grams of it a day, that might be quite, I'd have to drink a lot of your coffee to counteract that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you might magnify that if it's a laxative.
Yeah.
But no, I think creatine, for some people it's quite hard on the stomach, but there's loads of different types of creatine, and some are easier on the stomach than others. And some of them, you have smaller dose. I think micronized creatine, I think 3 grams is the dose as opposed to 5 grams. So there's different types out there. Generally, creatine monohydrate which is the most basic form, is the one that, that still gives you all the health benefits, I think. But then I think there's some like a bit of a dark underworld with creatine as well. There's certain types of creatine like Creapure, which are really respected as being like the cleanest and most lab tested form of creatine. So do a little bit of research as well.
Yeah. And then despite it all, they say it makes your guns bigger, but it doesn't. Not for me. I take it every day and it's not having any difference at all. I mean, I'll take it for the other stuff. But
you need to do the work at the gym as well, Tony.
You have no idea how hard I'm working in the gym. Oh. Well, apparently, according to Chris Geffin, I need to be eating 200 grams of protein a day. That's the problem.
That's a hard thing. How do you digest that much protein? Like, I just can't keep up with it. It's just it's a lot of protein you eat.
I know. Well, I told you what he said. He said, if you want to look like a bird, then eat like a bird. If you want to look like a beast, then eat like a beast. So I'm drinking my calories. I'm doing what he told me. I'm drinking my calories, but it's still hard to get to 200. Alex, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure some people will be sold on the benefits of a healthy coffee. Where can they find yours?
Yeah, head to excelcoffee.com and dive into the blogs section. And I have a blog on mycotoxins. I have a blog on instant coffee. I have a blog on cardio, cholesterol on coffee. So all of these things I've heavily researched and written blogs on, not in response to Rhonda's podcast. Over the last few years, I've just been finding all these topics and writing blogs. So, if you want to deep dive into the science, head to our blog section.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. I think I might see you on the beach later on.
See you in a bit. Cheers, dude. Thank you.